Following 10 years in the private practice, he has worked with Eagle Forum, the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund, specifically as a lawyer, editor, and financial officer. He's a member of the board of directors of the Eagle Forum Legal and Defense Fund and a trustee of the Eagle Trust Fund. He and his brother, Andy, continue Phyllis's work by releasing a weekly syndicated column. You can find it at townhall.com and worldnetdaily.com. John is editor and publisher of the Phyllis Schlafly Report, now in its 51st year of consecutive monthly publication. Everyone in this room should be signed up. If you're not, give your address to John Schlafly when you see him later. Please welcome him now, John Schlafly.
Thank you, Colin. It's great to be in the home of the Eagles, the area of the Eagles, and when the Eagles are winning. When Phyllis picked the eagle as her theme, 50 years ago, said Americans feared that the eagles were going extinct in America. There were only a few hundred left, and most of them wintered along the Mississippi River near our home. But they're much more abundant today, and as it came up towards this year's Super Bowl, I felt a little bit homeless at the Super Bowl because I come from a city that has lost 2 NFL teams, the only city, I believe, that's lost 2, the Cardinals and the Rams. So it was a moral dilemma. Do I support the Eagles because they're Eagles, or do I support Donald Trump's team, the Patriots? But in any case, it was a moral dilemma. That was the only time I would say that there's been any daylight between the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles and Donald Trump, I would say. So a quick word about Phyllis. As Colin said, one of the most important conservative leaders in the post-World War II era. She got started right out of college at the end of World War II when she helped the Republicans to take back both houses of Congress from the New Deal Democrats under the great leadership of Senator Taft, and culminated 70 years later. No one ever had such a career in public life among conservatives in 2016 when she helped to nominate Donald Trump and elect him as president. Now, how important was she? Well, I would just say that Mr. Trump thought it was important enough that he came to her funeral, and the night before he was inaugurated, when he addressed his top supporters at a blank tie dinner, he paid tribute to her and how important she was. And so she was, all those years, she was a leader in all the different causes, from anti-communism to Reaganism to fighting the feminism in the 70s. And along the way, she participated actively in, I would say, the great American baby boom. And while she had 6 young children at home, she turned out one of the 10 most important conservative books, A Choice Not an Echo, which was put her on the national stage. And then a few years later, when her youngest child was in high school, she embarked on the next phase of her career. She went to law school and graduated with honors from a nationally ranked law school, and became a leader, speaker, and so on, writer. And so in 2016, and if you want the longer story, I encourage you to speak with our good friend Ned Pfeiffer, who's an active participant in this meeting. He's known Phyllis since the age of 8, and you can get the full story. So in 2016, the conservative case for Trump. Now, that was not a campaign book. What it was intended to was why the Trump agenda was and is the conservative agenda. It was the return of conservatism, you might say, from the free trading and open borders type of position of the Bush family, back to the historic and foundational position of conservatism in terms of national sovereignty. And that's what she saw in Donald Trump and what the nation saw in him, I believe, putting America first and Americans first. And So those two issues have come to the fore in a very, very big way in just the last week, obviously, with the trade with China issue and with the southern border issue. All this silly talk about a trade war, with China. The real battle occurred in the year 2000 when President Bill Clinton conspired with the Republican Congress, then otherwise known as the swap, to give China permanent, normal access to the American market, even though they didn't qualify as a market-based economy, but promised to do so in some definite point in the future. And here we are 18 years later when China has piled up $1.7 trillion, which they are increasing at the rate of $300 billion a year, and they're still not a market trading economy. They have access to the American market, but when Americans want to do business in China, Americans are required to take on a Chinese state-owned enterprise as a partner and share their patents, copyrights, know-how, and so forth, so that the Chinese will eventually be able to supersede the Americans. Now, for those of you who believe in free trade in theory, at least, I hope you'll agree that that's not what free trade should mean, and that's not what we support. So then we had the border issue. We saw it on Easter Sunday before Donald and Melania Trump went to church. They sent out a tweet saying that, the borders are getting dangerous. The caravans are coming. And the media went into orbit about this because that was ridiculous. They're just a handful of a group of families who are just banding together for protection. They said, the media said, but Donald Trump, as usual, knew better, because those people from Honduras, primarily, who were organized and financed by an organization that believes in open borders. In fact, that was the name of the organization, People Without Borders, a transnational organization led by a man who claims he's a dual citizen of Mexico and the United States. That we shouldn't allow that. And an organization whose manifesto said they do not believe in borders, they believe in open borders, and that they were citizens of wherever they live. Now, that's not what we believe. That's not what Donald Trump believes. And he sent the National Guard to the border to protect our border, as he should. And the plan was that this week the caravan was going to pause for a couple of days for workshops, and they were going to be lectured by volunteer lawyers who would teach them on how to claim their rights when they get to the United States, on how how they can claim to be a refugee. And then, of course, they'll catch and release, and then they'll be released for years until their case comes up, and then they don't show up. That's what happened under Obama, as you know, and hundreds of thousands of people, including some MS-13 gang members, slipped in through the cracks and are now terrorizing communities across the country. But I think President Trump is not going to let that happen, because Donald Trump believes in America and putting Americans first, and believes in protecting our borders and the borders of this country, even if it means bringing back troops from Syria, where they've been protecting somebody else's borders, to protect our own borders. Now, so that's the conservative case for Trump. Phyllis, I should mention also, throughout her life, she believed strongly in the Constitution. I was with her one day when we went to that room in downtown Philadelphia to go in that room where 39 of the most brilliant men who ever lived met together in complete secrecy, with the shades drawn and with the papers gathered up and burned every day for 4 months as they produced our Constitution. She believed it was a miracle. The people who were there believed it was a miracle that could never have been repeated, never can be repeated. And James Madison, after it was over, said that having witnessed the difficulties and dangers experienced by the first convention, which assembled under every propitious circumstance, I should tremble for the result of a second one. So some of our, there is a movement, and some good people here. I listened to Senator Coburn yesterday, are speaking in terms of a convention to propose amendments, new amendments to our Constitution. And you can talk about the Constitution and convention in the same sentence. That, you might say, it triggered Phyllis, and it triggers those who knew her, because she revered the Constitution and she knew conventions. Phyllis Schlafly played a leading role in every Republican convention from 1952 until 2016. Now, that was an astounding record. That is, no one has ever come close to that, and I'm sure no one ever will. She knew how dangerous conventions are, because she witnessed firsthand what can go wrong, that how conventions go out of control. Now, she learned how to work conventions, and at the Republican convention in the years, she, more than any other person, changed the Republican Party from being the pro-choice, pro-Planned Parenthood party that it was in the 1960s and 70s to the pro-life party that it is today. But she saw what can go wrong in conventions, and that is the risk of opening up our Constitution to new amendments. Justice Scalia, the year before he died, said that he thought that a new convention for the Constitution would, his word, a horrible idea, because, as he said, this is not a good century for writing a convention, for writing a Constitution, I should say, not a good century for writing a Constitution. And you just look around at the people who want to change our Constitution today, and I think that what Madison and Franklin and Washington, of course, who presided, did 220 years ago. No, I think we learned how to use it. And, as Senator Coburn said yesterday, he said, well, for those who don't support convention, what's your solution to the crises we face, to the debt we face? Well, that's a good question. That is a fair question. I think we all need to take up that question. And everyone who comes to this meeting is concerned about the future of America and the future of our country. And there are things that we can do under our Constitution, such as reining in the courts. If we did have a balanced budget amendment in our federal Constitution, that would mean that the federal budget, would be a constitutional issue. And anything that's a constitutional issue becomes a judicial issue. And that means the judges would have the final say. Now, we're celebrating about the great tax reform bill that Congress just passed and the president signed. If we had a balanced budget amendment, well, that might be unconstitutional. There would certainly be a lawsuit claiming that threatened the balanced budget. And it does threaten the balanced budget. And judges might have the final say. Phyllis spent a decade of her life warning against the dangers of an amendment in the 70s that seemed so reasonable that everyone was for it. Everyone was for it, until she started writing and speaking and raising questions that the supporters could not answer. And as a result of that campaign, that amendment failed. Well, I don't think we want to open up the Constitution currently gives, the word budget is not in our federal Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power to borrow money, to lay and collect taxes, and to provide, which means spend, for the national defense or the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. So that is the budget. Congress has the power. Congress also has the power to rein in the courts. The federal courts, lower federal courts, are created by Congress and can be restrained by Congress, which can control the court's jurisdiction. Congress has used that power enough times to prove that it's really there, but not enough times to do what happens, do what needs to be done. And there are now, I think, at last count, 22 injunctions that federal judges have issued against President Trump. Congress can intercept those and take action against those, and Congress needs to do that. So, a little bit about our organization, and we certainly want to support you, and we want to welcome your support in what we are trying to do. And we do have a free gift for everyone at this meeting, which is our latest book pulled together by our new president, Ed Martin, Can't Trump This. And I thank you. It's been a great meeting here with the winning Eagles in the Philadelphia area. And so we certainly hope, one more word about the courts. We heard Byron York last night give us the chilling, really frightening message about how the deep state, the permanent government, the experts, the people who never wanted Trump to be there, who don't think he was legitimate, are working night and day to remove him before his term is out. And that is something we have to, keep an eye on, because that is taking away, you talk about protecting the Constitution, that's taking away the votes, the electoral votes of this state, this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, who put Donald Trump in the White House. And we all have to work together to make sure that that does not happen. And with that, make sure that that the message, the agenda that Donald Trump was elected on, which carried this state for the first time as you know, that is carried out and is repeated this year and 2 years from now. So thank you very much, Colin, and for everyone here. I've enjoyed being with you during the last couple of days. Thank you.
Thank you, John. It always seems appropriate to do a little Eagle